Imagine standing at the edge of a river. No bridge, no boat, no rope, no GPS. And on the other side is something your group desperately needs. Food, water, shelter, or maybe a completely new world. You look at the river. The current is moving faster than it appears. The water is cold. You can't see the bottom. So what do? How did ancient humans cross rivers? Did they simply swim? Did they walk through shallow water? Did they use floating logs? Could they have built simple rafts? And here's the really interesting question. How much ancient technology have we completely lost because it was made from materials that disappeared thousands of years ago? Today, crossing a river can feel almost effortless. We find a bridge. We check Google Maps. We drive across. But for prehistoric humans, a river could be a serious obstacle. And sometimes, it could determine where they could go. The first thing we need to understand is that ancient humans probably didn't always cross rivers in dramatic ways. Sometimes, they simply walked. If a river was shallow enough, people could search for a safe crossing point. They could observe the current, look for rocks, follow animal tracks, test the depth, and choose a place where the water was slower. It sounds simple, but think about what that required. They had to understand the landscape. They had to judge risk. And they had to make decisions as a group. Where should we cross? When should we cross? Can the children make it? What happens if someone falls? These are modern questions. But humans have probably been asking versions of them for an incredibly long time. And rivers weren't always enemies. They were also guides. Archaeological research suggests that river systems could function as natural routes through landscapes. They provided water. They attracted animals. They connected different environments. And they could help humans move from one area to another. So imagine a prehistoric group traveling across an unfamiliar landscape. There are no roads, no signs, no maps. But there's a river. The river becomes a natural landmark. Follow it, and you may find animals, plants, water, and perhaps other human groups. But eventually, the group reaches a point where they need to get to the other side. Now the problem becomes much bigger. Because water is unpredictable. A river that looks harmless today can become dangerous after rain. The current can become stronger. The water level can rise. A crossing that was safe yesterday might be deadly tomorrow. So ancient humans probably learned to read rivers through experience. And that experience could become knowledge passed from one generation to the next. But what if the river was too deep to walk? That's where another possibility appears. Floating. A log naturally floats. A person doesn't. That's a pretty important discovery. Maybe someone learned to hold on to a floating piece of wood. Maybe several people used the same log. Maybe branches could be tied together. And eventually, simple floating devices could become more sophisticated. But here's where we have to be careful. We don't have direct evidence showing exactly how prehistoric people crossed every ordinary river. Wood decays. Plant fibers disappear. Temporary structures can be destroyed by floods. And rivers constantly change their courses. Thousands of years later, there may be nothing left. Imagine an ancient group building a simple raft. They use it. It works. Then they abandon it. The wood rots. The river moves. Sediment covers the area. Thousands of years later, an archaeologist arrives. There's no boat, no photograph, no written record, nothing. So the archaeological record may make prehistoric technology look much simpler than it really was. And that's why some ancient water crossings are so fascinating. Because we know humans were capable of crossing much larger water barriers. Research into Pleistocene water crossings has suggested that water crossing abilities may have existed in multiple Homo populations, not just modern Homo sapiens. And one of the most fascinating cases involves Homo erectus. These ancient humans lived hundreds of thousands of years before us. Evidence from island environments has led researchers to debate how some early Homo populations reached places that were separated from mainland areas by water. One famous example is Flores in Southeast Asia. How did humans get there? Walking alone couldn't explain every possible route. Some researchers have proposed that watercraft or floating technology may have played a role. But scientists still debate exactly how these crossings happened. And that's important, because possibility is not the same as proof. We shouldn't imagine a perfectly engineered prehistoric boat unless the evidence supports it. But we also shouldn't assume ancient humans were incapable of experimenting, because experimentation is one of the most basic human abilities. You see something floating, you test it. You see a shallow section, you try it. You discover that one type of wood floats better. You remember it. Someone else learns from you. And suddenly, a small observation becomes technology. That's how human innovation can begin. Not with a complicated machine, but with a question. What if? And water may have created some of humanity's biggest what-if moments. What if we can cross? What if we can float? What if we can build something? What if the land on the other side has food? What if there's another group over there? What if we keep going? And this brings us to something extraordinary. Around 50,000 years ago, humans had reached Sahul, the ancient landmass containing Australia and New Guinea. These regions were not simply connected to Asia by dry land. Even when sea levels were lower, significant water crossings were involved. Somehow, humans crossed them. We don't know exactly what their vessels looked like. We don't know exactly how they navigated. But they made it, and that tells us something powerful. Ancient humans were not simply surviving inside tiny territories. They were expanding, exploring, taking risks, and solving problems. Think about that the next time you cross a bridge. You might be driving across a huge river in less than a minute. For you, it's just part of the road. But underneath that bridge is a problem humans have been solving for an incredibly long time. How do I get to the other side? Today, we use steel, concrete, engines, satellite navigation. Ancient humans had none of that. They had observation, memory, cooperation, and whatever materials nature gave them. Wood, reeds, fiber, animal hide, stone, and perhaps most importantly, their ability to learn from failure. Because one failed river crossing could be dangerous. Someone could be swept away. Tools could be lost. Food could disappear. An injured person could slow the entire group. So crossing wasn't necessarily about bravery. It was about judgment. The smartest choice might not have been to fight the river. It might have been to walk along the bank until they found a better location. Wait for lower water, follow animals, or simply find another route. And that idea is surprisingly modern. When we face difficult problems today, we don't always attack them directly. We look for alternatives. Ancient humans probably did the same. That's why rivers are such a fascinating part of human history. They were barriers, but they were also highways. They could separate populations, but also connect them. They could create danger, but also provide food and water. And they may have pushed humans to become more innovative. Maybe the first person who crossed a river didn't invent anything. Maybe they simply walked through shallow water. Maybe someone else held onto a log. Maybe another group experimented with branches. And eventually, generation after generation, small discoveries became bigger technologies. This is the part we often forget about prehistoric humans. They didn't have our machines, but they had something that hasn't changed. Curiosity. They could observe the world, ask questions, try things, remember what worked, teach others, and improve. So perhaps the real story of how ancient humans crossed rivers isn't about one mysterious invention. It's about thousands of tiny decisions. Where to cross, when to cross, what to carry, what to avoid, what floats, what sinks, who goes first, and whether the risk is worth it. And maybe that's why the question still feels strangely familiar. Because even today, when we stand in front of a problem, we ask the same basic question our ancestors may have asked beside an ancient river. How do we get to the other side? The technology changed, the world changed, our knowledge changed, but the question didn't. And perhaps every bridge we build today is simply the latest answer to a question humans have been asking since the beginning of our journey. How far can we go? How much can we overcome? And what happens if we cross?